Today's episode is brought to you by the Positively Grateful Resources Bundle, with a video training and dedicated workbook and some bonus personal stories. This Pay What You Want resource will guide you to a gratitude practice that works best for you. You can purchase this at positivelyproductive.com/resources. I often say that our environment both affects and reflects our mental space. Sometimes the clutter in your space is the direct cause of the stress and overwhelm, acting as physical reminders of incomplete tasks, distracting you and eliciting feelings of guilt and shame. And other times, the clutter in your space is a sign of the stress and overwhelm you're experiencing, an outward manifestation like a mirror reflecting the inner turmoil that you're experiencing. Either way, addressing the clutter is imperative as a first step, as is elevating the space to make it conducive to work. You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and as I sit here in my office recording this episode, I'm gazing at a deep teal color on my walls and twinkle lights shining, and I feel so cozy, which matches the vibe of the podcast and my coaching style. If you're curious what it all looks like, I've shared pictures on my Instagram page, and it was that post that was an inspiration for this episode. I'm pausing to appreciate the design of the space, which is relatively new, how it functions and how it feels, and I feel incredibly grateful to have it. I want to share what I did to set it up and why it works so well, so you can use similar techniques for your own space. I realize we don't always have the ideal space to work with or the amount of control we'd like to have in setting it up, and I know what that's like. When we moved to a new location 5.5 years ago, I set up my office in the corner of our bedroom. And for the first 3.5 years that we were here, I jokingly called it my corner office, and I did the best I could with a tiny little space. When I was considering this episode, it occurred to me that I've used so many of the same elements that I created in that corner space here in my new dedicated office. Whether you have a large private space or a shared section of a room, it's essential to acknowledge how your surroundings impact your productivity and to consider what you can do to design a space that helps you focus and fosters your creativity. We're talking about it in the context of a home office because so many of my clients have a business or work from home, and because even those of you who work outside the home have a space in your home where you need to be able to focus on things like paperwork and creative projects. The advice I'm sharing today can be applied to all of those scenarios and more. If you've spent any time with me at all, you know that in addition to talking about being more productive and living a fulfilling life, I bring up decluttering a lot. This is because when I first started my business, my focus was on physical clutter. It was just after my time as a caregiver for my mom while I had my babies. I became a professional organizer because I wanted to help others experience the same healing effects of decluttering that I did when I cleaned out my own chaotic post-caregiving world. The transformation was profound, and it led me on a journey that evolved into productivity coaching. Now I coach clients with a focus on their minds and hearts, because when you start there, everything else becomes easier. But I still appreciate the focus on simplifying our physical space. If you're curious to know more about my caregiving and clutter story, you can hear it on episode 34, and I'll be sure to put that link in the show notes. That's a quick summary of why I'm here today doing what I'm doing, and even though I talk of clutter within a different context now, I still help clients organize their physical space because I know how much it connects to their productivity. I often say that our environment both affects and reflects our mental space. Sometimes the clutter in your space is the direct cause of the stress and overwhelm, acting as physical reminders of incomplete tasks, distracting you and eliciting feelings of guilt and shame. And other times, the clutter in your space is a sign of the stress and overwhelm you're experiencing, an outward manifestation like a mirror reflecting the inner turmoil that you're experiencing. Either way, addressing the clutter is imperative as a first step, as is elevating the space to make it conducive to work. We've covered the topic of decluttering many times on the podcast, enough to fill a dedicated playlist. You can find that on the podcast page of the positivelyproductive.com website, positivelyproductive.com/podcast. With so many episodes dedicated to the topic, I thought today would be a good opportunity to talk about what's beyond the decluttering and how to maximize your space for productivity. Very quickly, I want to make a distinction here between decluttering and organizing. It wouldn't be a conversation with me about organizing without a reference to decluttering, and I want to quickly review why it is that you want to declutter and how it differs. So, decluttering and organizing are two different things, but they do go hand in hand, and one makes the other easier. Decluttering makes organizing easier because you have less to organize. It sounds very basic, but it's an important reminder because sometimes we get so caught up in the idea of getting organized that we don't stop to think about what doesn't belong. And you become more clear on what you have to organize once you've gone through the process of decluttering. Always declutter first because you do not want to waste your precious energy organizing what you don't intend to keep. Clutter needs to be carefully defined as well. It's easy to assume that something you have a lot of is considered clutter in your life. And bibliophiles, I'm looking at you and I'm also one of you. Don't tell me all of my books are clutter. Clutter is what you decide it to be. Peter Walsh says clutter isn't just the stuff on the floor, it's what gets between us and the life we want to live. So think about what's getting in between you and the life you want to be living. Thinking of clutter as a block, you can see how it might block us mentally or physically, and sometimes in very obvious ways, like having to walk around things. What isn't so obvious is how any kind of clutter can trigger stress and anxiety and cognitive overload. Clutter can remind us of unfinished tasks, and it can limit our brain's capacity because we're thinking of it even when we don't realize we are. Cluttered environments force our brains to process multiple types of stimuli simultaneously, dividing our attention and making it challenging to concentrate on anything else, even a simple task. It's almost like multitasking without realizing that you're trying to multitask. So before you work on the design aspect of your home office, be sure to declutter. Sort through papers, review contents of random boxes, and consider what's stored in that space because sometimes places like that can become a catch-all. You want to decide the purpose of the room and then only keep in it what goes with that purpose. That's one of my recommendations in my simple system for decluttering. The I in the acronym SIMPLE is for identify. You're creating decision filters this way with this step because, for example, once you know how you're using a room, it becomes so much more obvious what belongs in it, and it makes the choices that much simpler. Once you've cleared out what you can move on to designing and organizing your space. Here are 8 things you want to consider to help make your home office a more productive space for you. The first is ergonomics. You want to invest in a good chair and a keyboard to maintain good posture and reduce the risk of repetitive strain injuries. You want to be comfortable so that you can continue to work. Studies show that ergonomic setups can significantly decrease pain and discomfort, leading to increased productivity and focus. And it makes sense because you can stay longer, you can get into flow, and you can keep from having long extended breaks to recover from an injury. The next is lighting. Very practical, very important, but there are a few to consider. You want to consider how well your space is lit, but also what lighting can do for your focus, for your brain and eyes, and your mood. First, you have natural light. You want to maximize natural light exposure if you're able to. It's been linked to improved mood, energy levels, and productivity. And if possible, position your desk near a window, but be careful that you don't get too distracted by the window. Allow the window to give you the natural light, but also set yourself up so that you can stay focused on the work to be done. The next is task lighting, and this is adjustable task lighting that will help you reduce eye strain, ensure that you have adequate illumination for the work that you need to do. And something else along these lines that you want to consider is the type or color temperature of light as you're working on your screens. And the third kind of lighting would be your ambient lighting. That's incorporating soft ambient lighting to create a comfortable and inviting atmosphere. And an example of that in my office are twinkle lights, and I have them up all year long. It started as a Christmas thing, but I decided that they made me so happy, and I felt in such a good mood looking at them that I was going to keep them year round. The next thing to consider is your workspace setup. You want to choose a desk that provides ample support, or maybe extend it. You could do a door or a platform. It doesn't have to be an actual desk, but whatever the workspace is, you want enough space for your work materials. And you want a space that's going to be a comfortable distance from your computer screen. A space that will be conducive to the kind of work that you're doing. It'll be different if you are working on a computer and typing a lot and you're writing versus if you are handwriting and journaling a great deal, or maybe doing something more creative, or you are drafting. If you're an architect, your needs are going to be far different than if you're an author. So choose a space that functions the best for the kind of work that you do, and also that gives you the flexibility to clean as you go to avoid a cluttered space. And we'll get into that a bit more in a minute. The next thing to consider is your organization and accessibility. And accessibility is an important word. And what I mean by that is actually how you are getting what you need to work. Organizing is actually less about how a space looks, although having an organized space can look really good. But it's more about how it functions for you, helping you access what you need quickly and to be able to put it back as quickly too. You want to arrange your workspace in a way that works with your flow. Think of the immediate space around you as prime real estate. You want your most frequently used items where you can reach them quickly, whether they're tucked away or they are on your workspace. Either way is fine. It depends on the clutter levels that feel good for you and allow you to focus. But what's important about this is that will minimize unnecessary movement, and it'll save you time in terms of accessing what you need, putting away what you no longer need, and being able to continue to work in flow. The next thing you want to consider in your space is color psychology. You want to select colors that evoke the desired mood and energy level for the kind of work that you do, and maybe just your preference. Okay, so for example, blue hues are often associated with calmness and focus. Yellow can stimulate creativity. Orange is actually one that's related to being energizing and productive. I actually have a salmon color in my logo, which represents productivity, but the bulk of the colors in my brand lean toward teal because so much of what I do is about productivity that's done in a very positive and calming way. Research suggests that color influences our mood, emotions, and cognitive performance. So choose wisely the best that you can, and consider, even if you can't paint walls, you can bring in colors that make you happy through things like curtains and paintings. And you can, for a very reasonable price, get frames and cover them with fabric with colors and patterns that you like and put those up. And they're also great for absorbing sound. So that's a bonus. In episode 204, With Casey Riley, we talk about the impact of nature in our design, and it's definitely encouraged me to look out my window more. We'll actually talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Something else you want to consider is personal and inspirational decor. You want to incorporate personal items, photos, artwork, things that inspire and motivate you. If your family motivates you, have a picture of them somewhere around that you can gaze at and remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. Consider also decorating your space with things like inspirational signs and vision boards that display your goals and aspirations, that are mantras that are consistent with who you are and what you're trying to do. Visualizing your goals can help you stay focused and motivated. And when you take a break from your screen, you'll have that decor there functioning as a reminder to you. One of the ways I use my overly large whiteboard that I totally DIY'd is to put up my word of the year and to put up themes and things like that that I want to remember. And it's been a wonderful way when I take a break from my screen to see where I'm going. The next thing you want to consider, I just mentioned earlier with Casey Riley, is plants and nature views. If you can, introduce plants into your office space to improve air quality and add a touch of nature. So many reasons why that's so important and good for our overall wellness. If possible, position your workspace to have a view of nature, or find a way to seek it out during breaks. Research suggests that exposure to nature can improve cognitive function and reduce mental fatigue. And as I mentioned before, in episode 204, I had a chat with Casey Riley about something called biophilic design. It's using nature in our design. It's an approach gaining traction in so many places, especially where stress is high, like medical offices. Using nature, and specifically the green of nature, is an incredible way to restore focus, enhance productivity and creativity, reduce stress, and improve our overall wellness. So however you can bring it in, real, fake, or a view that you can access, do it. It's going to make such a difference for you. The last thing I want you to consider is less about the design and more about the habits surrounding your design. It's not just about how the space looks and functions, but how you work to maintain it and interact with it. The first thing within that would be to take breaks and to incorporate movement. Speaking of seeking out nature and using it where you work, it's critical to take regular breaks. You need to give your eyes a rest since they've most likely been staring at a screen. And you'll want to stand up, stretch, and move around. Studies have shown that taking a walk can not only increase energy levels and improve focus, it can help you be more creative. Add nature into that mix, and you have an incredible reset. Bonus round if you can incorporate mindfulness practices such as meditation or deep breathing exercises into your breaks. They're another way to reduce stress and improve focus. I have special lighting. I have a candle on my desk. I have essential oils at the ready. Any way you can add those tools into your space for these breaks and for this movement will definitely help. Another habit that's really important with how you interact with your space is a reset routine. I want to encourage you, if you do nothing else, this is going to help so much, to establish a daily routine of tidying up and resetting your workspace. I call this getting back to neutral. So it doesn't mean you have to clean up fully, but you're resetting the space to be used again. You can use this tip in any space, such as a kitchen or a bedroom. Kitchen is pretty obvious, where you put away everything and you clean the dishes, and then you're ready to use the space again. And this is a helpful habit from a practical sense because you prevent clutter from accumulating. The more things that you are no longer using build up on your desk like a really awful game of Tetris, and clutter builds, and it's harder and harder for you to actually work, as well as cognitively, because you're getting distracted by the clutter that's there. It's also important as a ritual for closing out your work. It's creating a mindful transition from one part of your life to the next. As you go through this process of setting everything back to neutral, It's a cue to your brain that you are closing out work. This is especially important in a home office where maybe the logistics are such that where you work in a home office is so close to where you do other things in your life that it feels a little too easy to go back and forth. I had one client who had this very problem, and by setting up this specific ritual and habit, it really helped her create boundaries between the two aspects of her life. It's also important for future work, for your future self, as it sets you up for success when you come back to work. You know how much better it is when you're greeted by a clean space. You feel encouraged and ready to work. You have the tools packed away where they need to be, so you know exactly where to get them. You're not searching for things, and you're not starting the process of working again feeling discouraged by all the clutter. So these are all areas to consider, and the list is definitely not all inclusive, but it's a solid starting point. If you were to pick 1 to 3 of these things, even just a small portion of a few of these, it will start to make a big difference. What's one of the favorites that you've heard? Is it the lighting? Is it bringing in more of the color that you love? Is it maybe trying that reset routine, setting everything back to neutral? I'd be curious to know, and I would love for you to message me and tell me. The most important thing here is for you to create a space that feels comfortable and it meets your individual work style and needs. You want to create a space that's conducive to your work. And the way to do that is to create a space that is you. Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback or questions, you can find me through the Connect page of the positivelyproductive.com website. And if you're looking for any of the resources mentioned here, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.